Hello everybody, my name's Dr Jack Noone. I'm a Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Social Impact. I've been here for about 4 years and have just loved it. I think one of my favourite parts of this job is the fact that it's just so frontward facing. So I'm definitely not in that kind of normal academic role that I used to be in. But before I tell you a little bit more about myself and about CSI, I actually want to know a little bit about you guys. So I'm going to just have a little bit of an experiment with some social polling software, which we're actually going to use throughout the day. So just bear with me. Hopefully you'll have a slide that's popped up in front of you that says, where are you joining us from us today? Where are you joining us from today? All we need to do to be part of this poll, and like I said, we'll use it throughout the webinar, is just to go open up another tab, not the tab that you're in, another tab, and just go to www.menti.com, and it'll ask you to put in a 6-digit code, which you can see at the top of the screen there is 227655. And as you're doing that, it'll pop up. Oh, look, people are already started. That's great. We've got hopefully a few people from outside of Australia, maybe even my parents or perhaps some relations or friends from overseas. We'll soon see if that's happened or not. But a little bit more about me. I came to Australia in 2010 and started working at the University of Sydney. I was there for 6 years before I skipped over to University of New South Wales to work at the Centre for Social Impact. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Centre for Social Impact, I think that the way I would sum us up would be to say that we're here to build the capacity of other people to have social impact. And we do this through our research and through our education, and also through our social engagement as well, which we call catalysing change. So for example, I do research and collaboration, obviously, and I also do research into financial wellbeing and also older workers' employment participation as well. So like I said, we're a very frontward facing organisation. We do research and teaching and leadership and collaboration, and of course an outcomes measurement and evaluation as well. So before I get on to the main topic of today, there's just a few people that I want to acknowledge. The first one's Liz Skelton and Kerry Graham from Collaboration for Impact. Now today we'll be talking about the Collaboration Health Assessment Tool, and Liz and Kerry, myself and the rest of my team co-developed that tool together. So it's just this beautiful match of academics and practitioners producing this tool, which I think there's about 65 or 70 collaborations around Australia that are using it. I also want to acknowledge and thank hugely Fanny Salignac, Ariella Meltzer, Isabella Saunders, and Gemma Carey. They're my team that have been working on this project with me. But above all, I want to actually really acknowledge the people that took part in the case study we'll be talking about today. I'll mention this in more detail later, but essentially it was a collaboration that wasn't going so well, and they came to us for help to help evaluate what was going on for them. And they very graciously allowed us to share our findings with other people for the benefit of everybody. And we don't get that opportunity very often, so I'd just really like to again say thank you to those guys. Okay, I think we can move on. We can see that we have New South Wales pretty represented. 2 people outside of Australia. What are the chances that that's my mum and dad? Who knows? Okay, I'll go back to the presentation. There we go. Hopefully you've got that slide. We've already talked about us. The one thing I've neglected to say is we're actually a collaboration between 3 universities. We have nodes at the University of Western Australia and Swinburne as well. Okay, so now, some of you might not know this, in fact, probably all of you might not know this, but I was actually a farmer in a previous life. You can see the homestead there in the top left-hand corner, my parents and my brother in the top right-hand corner with the dog Pip, who unfortunately has passed away, but I've recently heard that her progeny has now had progeny, so the bloodline continues. And then the bottom left, you've got my dad and myself doing some fencing with said dog, but you can see loves a pat. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got my beautiful partner and 5 newborn lambs. I think that was a couple of years ago. We have a lot of lambs. They might have 3,000 odd ewes at any one time. So yeah, decent size operation. That was my past career. So I'm in a different career now. Working a lot in collaboration, working on collaboration and in collaboration, and it's been a topic that's just fascinated me from the get-go. So what I want you to walk away from this webinar with is 3 main things, and that's an increased knowledge of what good collaboration looks like. I'd love you to have the increased capacity to diagnose good and bad aspects of collaboration, and then finally to increase your capacity to assist your own collaborations to work more effectively. So in true fashion, we have to do the poll, right? This is like the pre-post test. And in theory, how you rate yourself on these scales now will not be as high as at the end of the seminar, but there's only one way to find out. So bear with me as I bring up my poll again. Next slide. So I'll give you just a couple of minutes to do that. If you forget what these code numbers are, just message Rhonda and she'll give them to you. But if you leave it on your phone or in another tab, they should come up. I've actually hidden the results at the moment, you'll see in that bottom right-hand screen. And that's because sometimes there's a tendency for social desirability bias to affect how people respond to questions. So I will show you at the end what this looked like, but at the moment I'm actually hiding these results, so you won't see them until the very end. So hopefully most of you are on the page now. I'll give it another 30 seconds, but of course you can carry on doing this while I'm talking as well, of course. I just realized now we're gonna have a few awkward silences, but I guess we'll just have to deal with that. Okay, I'm gonna jump back into the other screen. And carry on. Okay, so today, a lot of the presentation is going to be based on the Collaboration Health Assessment Tool, which of course my team developed with Liz and Kerry from Collaboration for Impact. We're going to look at what collaboration actually is, what the Collaboration Health Tool is, why we need this in the first place. I'll briefly talk about how we developed it, and then we'll just actually look at the actual questions themselves that we ask of people, because it's essentially a survey that people within a collaboration can answer. And then we'll look at this case study example, of course, of the collaboration that things didn't quite go to plan for them. And I'll show you how we integrated the two together. So I think probably one of the first things we have to do is define what collaboration actually is. And you may have noticed, but collaboration's almost become a bit of a buzzword, and that you hear people say, oh, we're collaborating on this and we're collaborating on that. Hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll be able to say, are you actually collaborating, or you're working in some other kind of different way? So I think the main points to pull out of our definition there are the interactions of interdependent agents. Number one, in a collaboration, people are dependent on each other. This is quite different from other ways of working together where you actually might not be dependent on anyone else at all. Another way to think about it is, in a collaboration, if somebody drops the ball, it affects everybody in the collaboration. The next part is working towards a common goal. So that's another key aspect of a collaboration, is there's some kind of goal that you're working towards. You might have other goals, like your own goals, but there is a shared goal that the collaboration is focusing on, or a shared set of goals. And then another key aspect to that is usually people go into collaborations when they can't achieve that goal on their own. So those are the three sort of important aspects of what a collaboration is. And sometimes we would say to people that if you actually can achieve that goal on your own, then maybe you don't want to collaborate. Because collaboration can, it takes a little bit more time, it's a bit more difficult. So you may want to think about whether you need to collaborate or not. Another example is that you might be able to achieve a goal faster if you collaborate with other people. So that's what we're looking at today. I mean, I'm guessing that in the audience there's people that are very familiar with collaboration and people that are actually quite new to it as well, or might not be in collaborations per se. You're probably collaborating with people, on a daily basis in some shape or form. So you can think about those examples as we go through the presentation. So what is a collaboration health assessment tool? Well, it is a free evidence-based online resource for assessing how well collaborations are working together. And it was really important for us that we made this tool free so that everybody could use it. It's essentially 28 survey type questions, and it provides you a score across 8 dimensions of collaboration. And you can look at these scores across different groups within your collaboration as well. It takes about 10 or 20 minutes to set up. So it would usually be the leader of the collaboration that would set the survey up, and then they would send it out to everybody else. And it would take about 10 minutes for them to complete, for the people in your collaboration to complete the survey. And then of course you can look at the results all together and see how well you think you're going. And you can just take the survey yourself if you want, just to sort of give yourself your own self-rating of how you think things are going with the people that you're working with. Why do we need it? Well, I guess it gets back to that goal that we can't achieve on our own. And it comes down to these wicked problems. These are the complex problems in society where there's no real cause and effect. There's circularity, there's complexity. Some good examples of poverty, racism, entrenched disadvantage, all of these things can be seen as wicked problems. No one organisation can really, as far as we know, address them on their own, so we need to work together. Now, the thing was that there was a lot of these tools out there, but none of them were particularly comprehensive, and there was no real easy way to use them, which meant that people didn't know how well they were working together, and they didn't know where they should actually be improving, or even if they're improving. So people were sort of basing their working together on sort of hunches about how well things were going or not, whereas a survey actually gives you a pretty good indication. So we developed by doing a literature review to just understand what we know about collaboration already. And we've identified about 35 different dimensions of good collaboration. And we reduced this down to 8 dimensions. And we also did a literature review to identify existing measures of collaboration. We found about 135 different survey items, and we reduced those down to 28. And we did this through a series of pilot studies and tests with active collaborations, 53 of them in all. We did some follow-up interviews with people, and we did some statistics as well to correlate how people, say, for example, rated the strength of their collaboration compared to how they responded to the survey. We also did some thematic analysis of the transcripts as well. And I think I have a link to that article if you want to read it at a later date. This is what we came up with, and don't feel like you have to take in all of this right at the moment, because I'm actually going to go through each of these 8 different things, but we came up with these 8 dimensions of what collaboration looks like, and you can roughly divide them in half. The first 4 look at the structure of the collaboration, or the rules of the collaboration. This is what we do. And then the other half, the blue ones, are about the process. So this is the way that we work. So one way you can look at those first 4, for example, is around sharing, as an example. And then the other 3, we're looking at the extent that the whole system is engaged in this. So are we actually including people in the collaboration that need to be in the collaboration? Are we talking to each other the way that we should be? Is that communication effective or not? And do we have a safe environment to actually work in? So what I'm going to do over the next few slides is just drill down at each one of these 8 circles, or 8 dimensions of collaboration, to define them. And this just to show you what the survey questions are. We'll probably push through this pretty quickly. But a shared goal essentially is the overarching objective being pursued by a collaboration as a whole, over and above partners' individual agendas. Now, it's okay to have individual agendas, but you want to get those on the table first, so that a collaboration can make sure that those agendas don't conflict in some way, and if they do, what they can do to get around it. And there's actually 4 sub-dimensions, I guess, around having a shared goal, and these correspond directly to the survey questions. So some of the things we would want to know, and these are the actual survey questions that we use, so people would respond to that statement. Our collaboration has clearly defined the problem that it wants to address. And what we usually find is collaborations are actually not bad at doing this, about setting the goal that they actually want. It's harder to get some agreement on how we're actually going to do the work. So that would be partners have a clear understanding of what a collaborative approach would actually require. And then the last one there, in the orange box, alignment on collaboration goals, what we do in the tool is we ask the leader of the collaboration to put in all of the different goals for the collaboration in the short, medium and long term. And then the people in the collaboration have the opportunity to rate each of those goals on how important they think they are for the success of the collaboration. So ideally, people would be pretty well aligned on which goals they thought were most important and which goals they thought were probably less important. If they're not aligned, then of course that's a problem for the evaluation to be fixed. The next one, shared resources, is about the extent that the resources needed to sustain the collaboration's activities, such as data, funding and time, are available and committed to the collaboration. And of course we can see the 5 different dimensions there of what shared resources actually look like. So again, you just ask people in the collaboration, how much do you agree or disagree with these statements? And when you look at all of those responses together, then that gives you an idea about how well the collaboration is working together, for example, under shared resources. So it's about whether we have the right funding, whether we can access the data that we actually need to address social problems. I'll go into this more detail with a case study, but what we'll be talking about today is about an initiative that was trying to improve education attainment for younger people. So as we know, not everybody gets the opportunity to go all the way through school. And this group was actually there to make sure that to actually help people through school, make sure they got to class and graduated, all of that sort of thing. So they needed access to data to be able to actually do that. And I think another important one here is that the extent that we have the skills, the expertise, the specialization to actually address the goal that we're trying to achieve. So this all sounds very, I guess, formal. And I guess when we were developing this, we were thinking of actually formal collaborations. That's what we had in front of mind. But a lot of these things apply to less formal collaborations as well. We've got the shared authority, which is the extent that collaborators participate in decision-making, their willingness to delegate, and their capacity to deliver on the decisions that they make. And these are the questions that correspond there. Are all people participating in decision-making? And anyone that's been in a collaboration before knows that this actually varies quite a lot. Some people are and some people aren't for different reasons. They might not want to, or they might not feel like they can, for instance. And this is where power comes in. Now, power probably not going to be distributed equally across all partners in a collaboration, but there needs to be some give and take. If one particular organisation is hogging all the power, then it's less likely that the other partners will actually dedicate the resources that are actually needed, because they might be like, well, hang on, what's going on here? Shared accountability is the extent that collaborators understand their responsibilities and take ownerships for the results. And here are the questions. Do we have a system in place by which progress towards shared goal is measured? So this is about evaluating. Are we actually evaluating what we're doing here? Interestingly, the whole fact that people are using the chat tool probably means that they're actually doing well in this area. Another key part is whether each partner's area of responsibility is clear and understood. So you will have heard this before or experienced this before, when people may not exactly know what they're meant to be doing. And of course, you can imagine why that would be problematic. So that's what shared accountability is like, or is about. And then we've got our holding or our authorising environment. And this is about, I guess, the safety, and it's about building the right environment that we can move forward. So it refers to a setting that enables the collaboration to work together in different ways that lead to agreement. So an effective holding environment helps people maintain sufficient pressure on the group to accomplish real work without overwhelming participants with too much stress. So you can imagine that's quite important. And these are the questions that align with those 4 different subdimensions. Is our collaboration continuously building support, buy-in from leadership? We need our leaders to be pushing the work forward. Is there urgency across my community or across my community that I'm actually trying to help? Do collaboration members trust one another? That's a big one as well. And of course, they're all interrelated. So for instance, trust might be lower in instances where particular organisations are holding that power and won't let go, for instance. Communication flow is another really important one. I mean, they're all important ones, really. This is largely about internal and external communication. One of the ones I find that comes up a lot is the effectiveness of communication between partners. We all know about that whole meetings versus emails thing. So, an effective meeting is one where we actually set an agenda and we meet the goals for why we're meeting in the first place. That's effective communication. Less effective communication are meetings that, for instance, don't actually achieve that much. Could have been done through an email. So that's a large part about what communication flows are about. But it's also about shared language as well. So you can think of the opposite way of thinking about that is around jargon as well. So if we're here to help a community, are we speaking the community's language? And that's important for, well, obviously for communication, but to get communities on board and to co-develop solutions together. Then, of course, we've got adaptive capacity, which is the collaboration's ability to learn from its environment, as well as the strategies in place to enable learning and discover solutions through experience. So it's about learning and our capacity to actually learn, say, for example, from our mistakes or from what didn't quite go as well as what we'd hoped. And we can do this by seeking out different viewpoints to find different kinds of solutions and to reflect on things as they're going. So you can imagine if you're in a collaboration where you can't say that things went wrong, it's not a good environment, because then we can't actually learn and make things better. Remember that collaborations are often working towards those really wicked, difficult problems, and the solutions aren't easy, or they would have been come up with already. So it's absolutely vital that we can talk to each other about what's going well and also what's not going well and adapt from there. Then we've got whole system engagement. Now, there may be some people here that aren't as knowledgeable about systems, but you can imagine a fishbowl, right, as a system. There's fish in it, there's coral, there's salt water or fresh water, they all interact together. They're all sort of dependent on each other in a way. If you change that environment, if you turn the water up, the heat of the water up, then the fish respond in a different way. If you introduce particularly violent fish into your fish bowl, and people have seen this before, then those fish will attack the other fish. That's a system, and in a sense, like a broader social system is very similar in a lot of ways. So the idea is that we want to engage with people at different levels of the system, from community members up to government people as well. So these are the kind of questions that we want to ask then in terms of system engagement. Are those affected by the issue members of this collaboration? So this can be really important if you're going into a community, that you really actually want to have people from the community, or at least a representative, working with you. And it needs to be, what you're doing really needs to be informed by what the community actually needs. And we also typically need a diverse range of members as well, like I said, from community members all the way up to funders and government. All right, so that was a lot of me talking. I'm going to give you a chance now to give me your views, and I want to know from your perspective what you see as the most important aspect of collaboration. And I will actually give you a minute to do this. You just have to deal with me for the awkward silences. But next one. So you should, in theory, be able to rank those according to which one you think are most important. So these are the 8 dimensions that we were talking about. The results are hidden at the moment, but once we've got a few responses in, I'll unhide that and we can see what the results are. But while you are thinking about what you think is most important, what we want to do long-term with the collaboration health assessment tool is to be able to understand what aspects of collaboration are most important for achieving success. And we've got some good ideas at the moment, but we don't know how these different dimensions interact. And it's likely that we'll find that which of these dimensions is most important probably depends on the maturity of the collaboration. So how long they've been in operation, what kind of social issue area they're addressing, and the kind of makeup. But at the moment, we don't have really good quality data of what is it about collaboration that leads to success. It's kind of like we'll find the answer, but we just don't have the data for that at the moment. So what we're hoping is that people that use the collaboration health assessment tool over time will be able to see how their collaboration has progressed in terms of the health of the collaboration, and also whether they're achieving their goals or not, or which goals they are achieving. It's an ambitious project, but we've got the framework there. All right, I'm going to unhide these because Control H. No, that was not a good idea. So just bear with me. There we go. Now, hopefully you can see how that's scored, so long as I didn't mess things up there. Rhonda, just let me know if I have. But you should see what have we got there? 8 different bars. And what we can see is that people felt that having a shared goal was or is the most important aspect of collaboration. We don't know the answer per se, but in my opinion, this is pretty spot on. It's fairly fundamental. But of course, the key part of it is being able to agree on how to address or how to shape the collaboration, what it's going to do to achieve those goals. Next was communication flows. I've done this poll quite a few times, and kind of the same results come up each time, that communication between people is pretty important as well. So you might be able to see these sort of shadowy, mountainy things behind the different coloured bars, and that's how the responses were distributed. So you can see for shared goals, like the vast majority of people felt that was most important. But if we look at something like shared resources, you can see that people are actually quite spread out about which some people thought it was important, some people didn't. So we want to find the answer to this question. We just need to gather the data, and there's some work being done in this space as well. In fact, there might be some people listening today that can actually talk about this a little bit later too. All right. Moving on. So onto this case study. So we were asked to evaluate this initiative, and I've used the word failed there, but that's actually a little bit unfair because they are actually still in operation and things just didn't go as they planned. The aim was to determine which factors led to failure and to develop recommendations for getting the program up and running again. 9 interviews, so we did 9 interviews to identify why the program couldn't recruit any participants. So we just went out and interviewed a range of people from the collaboration and just actually asked them to try and kind of lay out sort of what the timeline was, what happened, and then we looked at those things together. We also sent out the chat survey, like we used those 28 items to figure out basically, you know, what the health of the collaboration was like. But unfortunately, we didn't get a good enough response to the survey to actually use that. I'm not sure why that is. It's a very common issue. To be honest, people don't particularly love doing surveys, and that might be part of the issue. But it meant that we sort of didn't have that survey data to rely on. So what we did is we used the 9 interviews to come up with a hypothesis about what we thought was going on, and then we sent that to the participants and asked them to about whether they thought, you know, it was sort of reflective of what was going on. And for the most part, sort of roughly chain of events, for example. So that's how we did it, and then we mapped those what was going on with the collaboration onto the different dimensions and sub-dimensions of collaboration, which is what I'm going to go through now. But to give you a little bit more information about these guys, and again, there's only so much information I can provide you, unfortunately, to protect their confidentiality. But the goal of this cross-sector collaboration was to promote educational attainment for primary school children, provided comprehensive wraparound support to families at risk. However, after what was deemed by some to be a successful pilot study, scaling up of the program was unsuccessful. Collaboration was not able to recruit any families, and it was put on hiatus. Progress was very slow, and it emerged that the design of the program may not have been what the schools wanted. As time went on, the context changed and government focus shifted away. Some people also felt that not all partners were committed to the collaboration. This was partly due to staff turnover in schools and into government departments and across other areas as well. So one of the collaborators became frustrated and started to run an alternative program. And this wasn't well communicated to the other members of the collaboration, and some actually saw it as direct competition to the program that they were trying to get up and running. So that is like the overview of what was going on for these guys. And what I'm going to do now is just go through basically each of our findings. So identifying like what the major issue was, because there was a few of them, what our sort of evaluation finding was, and then I'll show you how that's actually related to the different elements of collaboration. So apologies for my PowerPoint skills here. But this is the first issue, was that the pilot program arguably improved educational participation for high school students. It was assumed that this success would translate to primary school students for the main program. But this assumption wasn't tested. They did get some advice from a child psychologist, but it wasn't formally tested through an evaluation. So what this tells us is that they didn't quite have a shared understanding of what they needed to successfully implement this program. And this was partly because there was no formal evaluation. So this meant that the main program didn't have the data it needed. This means that learnings from the pilot program were not integrated into the main program. And this suggests a greater need for evaluation and to disseminate those evaluation findings. Now you may see there's some pretty fancy color coding there. And the method of my madness is this is how they map onto the different elements of collaboration. So you can see that there was sort of cut across different aspects. So for example, it did indicate that there was lacking shared understanding of the approach, for example. Another issue that we found was that the program was not always at the request of schools, and it didn't quite meet their needs either. This suggests that schools had limited voice in the design of the program, which is one reason why their needs were not sufficiently met. So a lack of participatory decision-making in response to their need may have hindered the development of a shared understanding of how to implement the program. Now, it's worth noting at this point that this was based on the perceptions of the 9 people that we interviewed. We didn't interview all, or we couldn't interview all the people in the program. Which is, and obviously it's a limitation. So we do have to take these findings with caution, because not everybody agreed, for instance. That's why it was such a shame that we couldn't actually do the collaboration health survey, because that would have helped us a lot. But getting back to those decision-making, the collaboration parts, I should say, there was a bit of lacking in decision-making, participatory decision-making, and that sort of need-based response as well. Some people felt that the program wasn't actually owned sufficiently by the schools or the school principals, which somewhat suggests a lack of engagement from schools related to that ownership, which was likely exacerbated by limited input into the design of the program. And again, this comes back to the shared ownership of the product or outcome. Some people also felt that the model wasn't practical for schools to implement. I remember one person said that for this to work with families, it has to be really simple, and they felt that there was just too many barriers to get people to actually sign up for the program. Similar as above, the perceived impracticality of the program suggests it did not meet the needs of the users. The implementation of an alternative program represents an example of an innovative approach, but this was not done in a consultative way, which would have sought out different viewpoints from different stakeholders. And again, we can see the different aspects of collaboration here. So these are what we would call the design issues with the actual physical design of the program. There's also issues directly to do with collaboration. One of the issues, of course, was that an alternative program was implemented by one agency. This suggests that one agency definitely had a different understanding of the best approach to program implementation. However, the alternative program and its rationale were not well communicated to everybody else. This led to confusion among partners, including schools, and it may have played a role in damaging relationships among partners. And this created a bit of a distance as well, and a loss of momentum. So again, then we can see the different aspects of collaboration that relates to. Not all partners were engaged as much as others in the collaboration. So key stakeholders were perceived to be absent from the design implementation, including some principals and Department of Education staff, due to staff turnover and or a perceived lack of interest. It was also possible that staff turnover meant that partners entering the collaboration did not have the authority to make decisions. Now, again, reiterating what I said before, these are based on the people's accounts that we spoke to. So we can't know for sure the extent that this was true across the whole of the collaboration. But what it does speak to is that authority to commit and the diversity of stakeholders as well involved in the collaboration. There are also issues with timing. So the program experienced significant partner turnover with respect to principals and government staff. However, the introduction of new partners was not well communicated. It was also perceived that the schools that signed up later were less engaged than others, suggesting that they saw less value in the program. As one participant mentioned, there was a need to bring organisations on board rather than individuals to mitigate the risk of staff turnover. Likewise, the shift in government focus away from supporting small programs suggests the need to continuously gather support. And of course, this will be of no surprise to you now because you know the chat tool so well, but these are the different aspects of collaboration that were perhaps not going as well as others. Another key aspect was that people's understanding of the time it would take to actually establish a functioning collaboration was underestimated. And this was reflected in internal meetings that were perceived to discuss the same issues without action, which led to frustration, reduced attendance, and a general loss of momentum. So we can see the different aspects there too. So it's a lot of information to take in, but what I'd like to get your thoughts on is which of those different issue areas you think was the most problematic. So this becomes easier if I open up my presentation thingo and go to the next one. There we go. So these are the 7 different issue areas that I raised, and it would be great if you could have a go at just ranking which ones you thought were most responsible for the collaboration's lack of success at this point in time. I'll give you a minute or so to do that. I can also see that I'm talking a bit slowly, hard to imagine. So I might just whiz through the next few slides reasonably quickly. So I'd love to hear your feedback and questions and whatnot.
Hey Jack, it's Rhonda here.
Hi.
Hi, we do have a few questions.
Yeah, great. Well, now's a good time.
Do you want to ask them now? I'll facilitate that. Or do you want to get through the rest of your slides?
Give us one question, a real juicy one.
Okay. We've got a lot of questions about the chat tool, so I'll leave those to the end. But sorry, just in relation to, I think it was in relation to the case study, Joe had one and asked, has Jack described anything about the leadership and overarching governance of the partnership?
So it was a collective impact strategy, collective impact initiative, I should say. So it had those normal structures of a backbone, which include the leadership group as well. And this was one program of many within that collective impact strategy. I can't say too much more about the exact leadership structure because just to keep things confidential. But it was like what you would expect.
Okay, I think we'll leave the rest to the end. So yeah, we'll come back on later.
Okay. Now. So number one. Sorry, I'm going to have to get close to the program. Requested schools and did not meet their needs. So that was ranked number one. And what was ranked 7th was, while the initial setup stages took longer than intended, larger scale context change was occurring. I can't see the level of agreement. It's hard to know. One of the things that we agreed as a group was that implementation of an additional program wasn't the cause of the problems. It was just like a reflection of what was going on. So there was something obviously happening before that. And for me, I guess personally, I think it was about one of the main aspects was about just the underestimation about the level of time it took to actually get things up and running. That would be my sort of personal look at that. Okay, let's go back. All right. So it's time to talk about their strengths. And this is important because if the collaboration was, well, they are trying to get back up and running again, they need to be able to use their strengths to be able to address the issues that they were facing. So one of their first strength was that they had an amazing memorandum of understanding. It did take quite a lot of time to get it together, but it was fantastic. For the most part, people actually did agree on their goals, and the people had a really, really strong theoretical grounding in the foundations of collective impact, which, apologies for the collective impact people out there, but is heavily focused on collaboration and to be able to share data as well, and to have like that strong leadership group behind it. So people were well versed. There was part of that. There was a good, strong setup for data sharing across agencies. There was very much a diverse and appropriate skill set. Most stakeholders were actually on board, and there was some pretty good clarity of roles and responsibilities that were very well set out in that MOU. The activity was absolutely based on the community need. That was very evident, and they did agree that they had the capacity to have open and honest conversations. I think there was just some things that people just didn't know were going on. People felt that there was the opportunity to be creative, and that they had enough knowledge about collaborative practice to bring others on board. They also did feel that there was goodwill and trust among the partners as well. That might have been eroded, but they felt like in general, that they were going pretty well. And here's a summary of those 7 different issues that they were facing as well. So the task then really is to figure out, well, how do we pull this all together? And one of the ways we did that was just by actually, of course, we've done this, but just by matching up these different strengths and issues with the aspects of collaboration that we talked about. And one of the first things that we can see is that comprehensive memorandum of understanding really had an impact had a positive impact across all of the different aspects of collaboration. It really set things out pretty well. We can see that little arrow there. Where's my other arrow? And that strong theoretical grounding, that talks a lot to being able to shape goals and theoretically to be able to achieve them as well. And then when we look at how these relate to the different aspects of collaboration, there's a few themes that come out as well. And this is just exactly what we had before, just in a different way. or presented in a different way. The first thing we can see here that shared or a lack of shared understanding of the approach was related to quite a few of those different problems. Same thing with internal communication as well. It was associated with a lot of different issues. So you could imagine then that those would be two aspects then that the collaboration would actually want to focus on in the future. So as another way to put it together, this is kind of like our hypothesis. It's a bit hard to like come up with a proper timeline. So I've just got pluses there instead of arrows, but there's these three, or you can see the 7 different aspects of these design problems, collaboration problems, and timing problems that together sort of was a bit problematic. But there was also these 2 really interesting feedback loops as well. So collaboration problems led to a timeline slippage, which led to more collaboration problems, which in turn created more timeline problems. So this is what we call a feedback loop. And the same with design as well. So the design problems brought out kind of a fractured nature in the collaboration. One agency tried to repair the design problems with an alternative program, which had unintended consequences of fracturing the collaboration further. So this is what we basically presented to our 9 participants and said, well, what do you think? And for the most part, they mostly agreed with what was going on, with some few sort of different ideas as well. In terms of recommendations, and apologies, I'm going a bit quick here. We actually recommended that they compare our findings with evaluations that have been done on similar findings, because this was our perspective, and they might be able to learn things from other evaluations of similar programs. We also suggested that they actually examine the strengths and challenges of the alternative program and use that information for re-implementation. So it could be that the alternative program was actually quite good, and then they could actually learn quite a lot from it. We encouraged them to create a theory of change to establish those short, medium, and long-term outcomes for the program. They had some good ideas, but they probably didn't spell it out as well as they could have. And of course, to develop a strong internal communication strategy and integrate that into the existing MOU. So they've done all this great work beforehand on just laying out what the purpose of the collaboration was and how they were going to go about doing the work. What they found, and what we found, was that people had started backing away from the collaboration a bit. So what they needed to do as like a first step was to do a needs analysis, or basically to talk to the people and find out what it would need to get them back on board and to restart things. Hopefully doing all of these things would actually start to recreate an environment of trust, particularly if the person that implemented that alternative program led the evaluation charge and shared their own strengths and challenges. And then finally, not surprisingly, we advised them to actually administer the chat survey to establish a consensus on collaborative strengths and weaknesses. Now, one last poll before we go to questions. Oops, no, that's not how you do it. You can probably guess what this question is. It's the same questions that you answered at the start. How about we do one more question, Rhonda?
Hi there. We've got loads of questions about the chat.
Sorry I've taken so long. I didn't realise it was going to be that long.
We've got 10 minutes left.
Oh.
So loads about that. I want to keep them together.
Yep. Well, we're basically done. This is it.
Okay, cool. So here's one. The terms collaboration and co-creation are often used interchangeably. Can you define the differences and/or similarities between both? Did you explore co-creation in your research, and is it important to make a distinction? That sounds like a big question.
I would say that to do co-creation, you would need to have like a strong sort of collaborative foundation to really do that. Because co-creation actually needs people to let go of power a little bit and not assume that their way is the right way, and to actually work with people to create something. So they are very similar. I would see co-creation as falling under collaboration. It's like collaboration would be, in my mind, the means to do co-creation. So to put that in another way, if you were just, I don't know, didn't have a collaborative relationship with somebody and there was no sort of understanding about who was doing what, what the power balance was, etc., it would probably be a little bit difficult to co-create something, I would imagine.
Okay, great. Do you want to go to the survey results?
Yes.
We'll get to the Q&A.
All right, now, let's go back to the start though. Come on. Let's unhide these results. All right, that's how people were at the start. All right, so we had to try to kind of memorize this. 3.7, 3.2, and 3. All right. Oops. Oh. Oh, look at that. I'm taking that as a win. So we went from, it was 3.7 in the first instance, 3.3, and then 3. So there's almost like a 2-point increase in people's, I guess, confidence to work with or work in this area. So I'm going to take that as definitely positive feedback. Let's get back to that presentation, or the end of the presentation. That's gone. That's it. All right. As I said, the collaboration still is in limbo. If you have actually recommendations for them, pop them in the chat and I'll send them to the people, and they will probably really benefit from your advice. There isn't one more poll. I lied. And that's it. Rhonda, let's go to Q&A.
Yeah, so we might leave that slide up for a bit so people can see those URLs.
Yep,
and then
sure.
we had a request from Sandy. If you, after this slide, can you go back to the recommendations slide?
Yes.
She's keen to see that. And as I said in the beginning, we are recording this presentation, so you'll see the slides that way as well.
Yep.
So let's do some quick fire questions, Jack, because we've got 7 minutes.
Sorry.
That's okay. So let's talk about the chat tool. Heaps of questions.
Yep.
So what would be a minimum number of responses to the chat survey for it to be useful? And
5.
the chat tool, not the chat box that we were talking about, the chat tool.
5.
5. Okay, cool.
You have to have 5. If you don't have 5 responses, you can't see the results, and that's to protect people's confidentiality, because you can't see what other people have responded.
Okay. From Junie, should the chat tool be used at the beginning of the collaboration and several other times throughout the collaboration? How often do you recommend?
Yes, but maybe not like right at the start, because you're probably just starting to get to know each other. So you want to be working for like a couple of months, so you've got that sort of whole environment there to use as a foundation, and then do the chat tool. And then it really depends time-wise. Maybe once a year, once every 6 months. It depends. If you've got something big, like some big event coming up or some big decision that you've got to do, then I'd incorporate the survey around that time.
Right.
As I said before, people don't love doing surveys, unfortunately. So you really have to explain what the purpose of the chat tool is for. So then people will be more likely to actually use it.
I understand. It's hard to get people to complete surveys about this.
Yeah, everybody out there. That's a passive-aggressive message to everybody.
From Keith, chat is great for reviewing progress. Thanks, Keith. Are there similar design roadmap tools available? For example, a pre-collaboration survey.
Well, this one is free.
Pre-collaboration.
Oh, you know what? The people to talk to would be Robin Keast, or if you even just do a Google search for her and find her website. She's done a lot of work in this area. There's also the Victorian Health Partnership tool, which it's kind of similar to chat, but it's more for a health focus. But they've got a lot more to do on like developing a collaboration in the first instance. And of course, if you're really interested in this, chat tool doesn't carry a collaboration for impact. Or myself, obviously, as well. But these guys are like the expert practitioners, so they'll give you some good advice.
Well, I'll get you to send me the links, Jack, and I'll send it with the survey email.
Should I stop sharing the screen now?
Actually, if you could go back to the recommendations one, that'd be awesome. I'll ask the next one. Has the tool been tested much in regional areas? This is from Wes. He works in southern New South Wales and northern Victoria. Yeah,
I would say probably not to the extent that it has been in urban areas. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this tool today was to actually get more and more people to use it. That's probably one of the things that I wish I'd have more time to do, is to get the chat tool out there. So probably not as much as it could do. I'm hoping to get a report out on the data that we do have by the end of the year, and that'll tell us a little bit more.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
From Corin, I'm curious if there are any tips for handling the debrief and discussing the project after using the survey tool.
Oh, that's a good question. I think probably I would be thinking about like what the fundamentals of collaboration are, and that's that ability for everyone to have a voice. So I would be asking the leader of that collaboration to make sure that they've actually created a really safe space for people to talk about the findings. And I think the first step is just to reflect on what you've seen. So one of the questions I ask people is, are any of these results surprising to you? Are any of these results not surprising? And that can kind of get people talking. And then after that, I guess it's a case of, why do you think that these are the findings that are coming out? What are the different kinds of explanations? Because it might just be, for instance, that, just the external context, for example, at the moment might be affecting the way collaboration's operating. It might not actually be to do with those more micro factors. So it's good to think about other things that are going on as well.
Just one more question about the tool, and then I'll get on to others, because it's not just about the tool, this webinar. From Joanne, she's wondering if the answer is to approach collaborations using deliberative democracy and participatory planning approach. Do you have any comments about this, Jack?
I don't know much about deliberative democracy, but it kind of sounds like it's right in that same sort of area as collaboration as well. So I can't really comment on that too much, except to say that it sounds like a sensible idea.
This is an interesting one from, I hope I say this right, Kamea. Do you, Jack, have any views or ideas about collaboration and traumatised communities?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I can offer anything really useful there. The thing probably I would say the most would be that, we're doing this work to help people. So if a community is really, really in trouble, you wouldn't want to throw lots of surveys at them. It's about getting people sort of happy and healthy in the first instance. So the only thing I would say would just be to be really cautious about how you approach it. But aside from that, I couldn't comment, sorry.
That's okay. If anyone else has any comments, please.
Oh, please do.
Yeah.
And I'll start sharing the screen. Stop sharing, I should say.
And we'll send the chat feed to everyone. We sometimes do that with the webinars when there's heaps of resources added to them. So we'll do that. 2 more questions.
Yep.
Actually, yeah. From Quinton, a statement, then a question. Community engagement and stakeholder engagement have been widely used and sometimes overused for the past few years. Do you think communities are now tired of the number of groups leading these engagements in early stages of collaboration? Oh, sorry. Second part to the question. Do you think communities are now tired of the number of groups leading these, and should the early stages of collaboration be led by an independent group like CSI to collate all data and avoid multiple engagement within the community? Yeah,
so community fatigue is a really big issue. It's sort of like survey fatigue in a way. And I think that's been in part caused by different groups just coming into a community saying, hey, we're going to help you, and then not really do that and then kind of leave. So we have to be really careful that we actually, if we're going to do something, that we commit to it in the long term. I don't think necessarily CSI has to be the person or the organisation to do that. I think it has to be run by the community itself, and community people that are, representatives that are wanting to see change can then reach out to us or other organisations as well. It's sort of like we kind of have an ethical responsibility, I think, to work in that way.
Last question. I'm actually going to combine 2 because it's around interpersonal.
Good question.
Yeah, that was a good question.
Yeah.
So the last one is 2 combined around interpersonal skills and relationships.
Yeah.
So I'll ask them both separately. Doesn't success, this is from Chris, depend on spending enough time together at the outset, exploring and agreeing how to make collaboration work, potentially using the chat tool, and then invest in inducting new people? And then the other question from Emma, which is similar, is what about interpersonal skills and personality types? Do you need certain types of people to be driving collaboration for it to be successful? Yeah.
So the first question, I think that doing the work at the beginning is absolutely critical. And I guess it's just people have to be patient a little bit, because collaborative work just takes longer. But it's worth putting in that work at the start. I know one of the issues that can crop up is that when a collaboration is funded by an external funder, that the funder might have their expectations of what gets achieved and when might not actually align as well with what a collaboration can actually achieve. So the collaboration then has to sort of focus on KPIs rather than actually building a solid foundation. And what we know is that you need that foundation. In terms of personality factors, that's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to it. But I do know, I guess I can answer one aspect of that, and that's around sort of that leadership style. And I think that traditional, hero, big man version of leadership isn't appropriate for a collaborative work environment, and that you need that more sort of adaptive leadership style, one where leaders actually engage or create opportunities for other people to lead as well. So it's a more supportive environment that helps people grow. So that would be I know it's not personality stuff, but it's about sort of individual aspects. Apart from that, I don't know the actual literature on personality types. But yeah, I think we could probably all guess those personalities that might be better or not in collaboration.
Okay, I think we'll end with that, Jack.
Right.
Personally, I've learned a huge amount about collaboration, and I'm not in that world. So even though I collaborate, I suppose, day to day, but I really appreciate your time and effort and your knowledge. And
no problem.
Everyone else does as well.
So
as I said, we'll send the chat, the feed that we had during the webinar, we'll send a whole heap of links. And we'll also put Jack's contact details in there if you've got any more questions.
Yeah. Drop me a line anytime.
Thanks so much, everyone, for attending. Number 16, we'll see you again soon.
Thank you to Rhonda. Thanks, everyone. Good to see all your faces.
Bye.
Bye.